Recently, I dug up a theory that I had long, long ago. This was before the first time skip. This one's when Zareth was still fresh, and we do have stuff like, again, the Black Wizard. And to me, like, there was always that. I've personally always had the strong fascination with the whole idea of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And it was one of my early theories, like, again, very early into my days of fairy tale, that I had this idea of, like, if Zareth was the Black Wizard, in a line to, um, obviously, I know it's not the 100% spot on because it's the Pale Horse, but I mean, like, it's easy to associate, especially with a lot of fiction, with the color black for death. And then with Ferris later coming out, well, at the time of being as the White Wizard, later to be Athena, because with at least with Ferris, when she was with the alias and going as, like, kind of just pretending she was the White Wizard, obviously taking over people, there's an aspect of conquest to that, as well as going into the actual one with the White Wizard being Athena, like this whole thing of with let me drop my stuff. Goes into the whole idea that they've had around, like, magic, and the whole issues of taking the fight to the dragons, the man-made dragon slayer stuff, and obviously with alchemy as well, like an aspect of science in there. But I think the way that it's like humans wanting to take down the dragons also kind of goes into it again with conquest. And I think with Zero, it's kind of hard with Zero with, like, the color green, and now we have Bestia, but she's the least really with information to use. But with, if you have Zareth as the Black Wizard, Athena's the White Wizard, and then again, at least for me, just used for the sake of the conversation, you have Zero as the Green Wizard, and you have Bestia as the Red Wizard. I think all this really makes a lot of sense, at least again in terms of a theory, because it aligns well again with the themes. And you have, like, acnology is like the thing with the apocalypse. It's something completely different with the dragon gods because they're all based on the luminary days. So it's like, okay, if they're their own selective theming thing, it makes sense of why something completely separated from them, with, again, connections to with acnologia, but obviously more so with Zareth. But I think it makes a lot of sense that if you split them up, again, it's like if you look at Zareth was his own faction, essentially. Obviously, like, he had his own stuff going. You know what I mean? Like, Acnology is actually his own faction, but it's like Zareth is, like, the leading force that was his own position in the verse. Like, even if he didn't have all, the Spriggan and the Alvarez and whatnot, like, the Alvarez Empire and everything was just an addition to him, but it wasn't, like, it's not like he was reliant on it. So if you look at him again, it's like his own side, and then suddenly now you kind of, you have everything kind of more so moving Zareth's out of the way. You have, again, in theory, Bestia is the Red Wizard, so it'd be like, okay, well, this is one that goes willingly and is acquired by the person of their faction. Like Ignia, again, this is, I'm making assumptions for the sake of, like, stuff that is, like, not fully confirmed with Bestia, but I feel like is easy to go off of. That Bestia, I think, until otherwise said, Bestia is Wed's mother and Ignia's lover of, to extent I would assume that she's obsessed and follows him, and as they have a kid. Again, assuming, but with that, then you have Ferris and Zero. So you have someone who acquired their, like, if you think about it, again, it's like a dragon dominates and wins it over through sheer power and excellence. With Ferris getting Zero, it's like, this person that was already corrupted, happenstance to be already altered into a demon, pretty much died but didn't die, and she brought him back, turned him into an Aetherius, and now has him on her side. So she was able to add in, again, the person on her side in this whole setup through the events of their past that led into them diving into black magic as well, and then black magic saving them, but ultimately putting that person under her. So in theory, again, with Athena, I think Athena would make a lot of sense to be in this whole structure, to be with Elefseria, because with the idea of conquest and the sides of each of the True Dragon King Festival, you have the humans, the dragons, and you have the Black Wizard. You could really just look at each of them. It's okay, Ignia's side, you have Natsuko's side, and then you have Varys' side. So with the human side having to do Elefseria involved, I think it would make a lot of sense if out of the three factions, again, it would make a lot of sense if he ended up being a traitor, because it makes sense that if the human side is the one that has some form of dark kind of twist within their ranks. But also, I think it would make a lot of sense as if the wizard in, the colored special wizard in this group would be something that was, again, man-made, something that was acquired to, created and later reacquired for this upcoming battle. Because I think it would make, because we still know that Elefseria, like, every time that we have some form of information that he reveals, he only gives us parts of it and doesn't give us any details that involve him and what he does as much. And we end up getting other characters that have information and were involved be like, oh yeah, here's some stuff, and it's like, why didn't Elefseria just tell us the first time? So it's like, when you look at, again, the themes of it, and if humans, especially with Elefseria back at the opening first couple pages of 100 Years Quest, I think it would make a lot of sense for him as a human and be the one that kind of like being in the footing of the human faction would be the one that would be like, okay, well, I'm perfectly fine using darker and more extreme methods in order to win, because I'm looking at my opponents and it's like, black magic's already doing crazy black magic things. The dragon is a dragon. He'll do whatever he feels like in any interval that he wants to. And with that, I think Elefseria has always been in a position where he doesn't really care about abiding by the rules. We know that, and I say rules as if there's like rules for like the world scale domination war of who's going to win between these sides. But you know what I mean, where it's like he's not afraid to, like, he wouldn't be afraid to do something that is really, again, like drastic and underhanded, because I think at the end of the day, he is aware that he has to do stuff like that in order to win, because they're also the underdogs, really. I guess Ferris is, is pretty much kind of is, but she has a lot of weird stuff that kind of be like, plus she's a big villain faction of her own, so it's like, okay, she is in terms of what we know, but she isn't in reality. And the side for humans, I mean, really, you have some capable people. You only have a handful of capable people. And because of that, I think if we have something like Elefseria, if he's going to do something with Athena and do some crazy reveal later with Athena, I think it would really align up, even if it doesn't go down this whole line with like these different colored wizards. That it aligns enough that this theory fits into the pathway of the rest of the series that makes sense with what we know of. Like, because Elefseria, this is something that I think, I don't want to say everybody, like, relatively everybody's had suspicions about him, but there's been a long-standing faction of people that have believed that Elefseria was going to be a traitor at some point, and still do. And I think if we have something like that, where we get kind of like a mess situation, where he's still on the side of humans, but there isn't a low road that he'd be willing to take in order to guarantee their victory. Now you look at stuff with like him sneaking and doing stuff with August. It would be pretty on point if Elefseria did something of the same nature and was just like, we sent Athena into battle, blah blah, and he's like, oh well, I foresaw this and I made a plan. I set her to self-destruct, and she's going to create, like, I don't know, a full anti-magic matter dragon super bomb that, like, all of everything within like this X amount of distance will just be destroyed, and this is how we're gonna win, but we'll have to sacrifice Athena in the process. But I think it would make a lot of sense too if like he ended up doing something like that and the fairy tale members are like, dude, what the fuck? And he's like, well, she's a weapon. He's like, not really, like, she's full sentient and consciousness, and we already let a whole thing about her having human-like emotions, so it's like, you can't say something like this. But he'd probably be like, well, still, weapon made by humans for us to win, so I guess it's okay. Because tell me if I'm wrong in the comments, like, Elefseria doesn't give off that presence where he would be one of those characters to do this. But we'll explore more into this, obviously. I want to talk about it more so as a large-scale theory, and there's some stuff I want to kind of like peer into that kind of tie them together, but I wanted to get each of them relatively as their own thing and talk about just kind of like where each thing comes from. Because again, I think that if this theory ended up being true, I think it's interesting again in how it differs between each part. If Bestia is the red wizard, Ignia managed to acquire her loyalty and her following in like a direct way of just, clearly being, my name's Ignia, I'm big, powerful Magoo. Look at my clear superiority in the element of fire than anybody else. You look at Ferris, we know that Zero is literally like, well, you pretty much saved me, so I owe you. And then with Athena, I think Athena would just not really suspect it. If Elefseria started like making her do things that he didn't really see like malicious in saying it, but it's really, when you think about it, it's like what he's doing. Again, if he's like, oh yeah, go go end up, do this, go fight this character, go kill this character, this character works for Ignia, go do this, blah blah. But then it's like, maybe the character's already defeated, and it's like, well, he said that he didn't want to fight anymore. He said he's good. He's like, well, he's learned the error of his ways. Lekka's like, you know what? I'm about to reveal all my, like, whatever reason my fire is special. But at the same time, all I ask is you let me go home. And Athena it would completely make sense if, like, the fairy tale members were like, you know what? Sure, like, you haven't done anything evil. Like, we've been enemies. You haven't done anything outright evil. So I could see I could see this deal going forward. But if given the orders from Elefseria in a way that, like, because she has consciousness and her own free will, but at the end of the day, she is still a man-made machine and weapon. So it would make sense if Elefseria knows a way to essentially override her free will and consciousness and have her do stuff. So if, like, you were like, oh, cool, Lekka, in a normal situation, we would let you go, and, like, everything's good. But Athena would just be, like, guns out, ready to be like, okay, cool, we're going about it. Because that's another thing I think was really weird with Athena, is we saw, like, I use this panel specifically because I remember how, well, I say panel, bit of Athena specifically, because I remember when this chapter came out, and, like, she had these cool orbiting laser guns, and I'm like, why didn't we see her do some stuff like that? And it's like one of those things, like, maybe that's going to be just waited for the actual time when we're going to see her fight. I would love to see her, like, it's like if she's like a rogue enemy, and we have, like, it's like maybe in between the factions there were just a couple loose fighters just running around that we have to deal with, and somebody's like gonna be like, okay, yeah, this is now a new problem for you guys. But yeah, tell me in the comments what your opinion is on this theory, what your opinion is on the other ones that I've been mentioning. Again, these different colored wizards. Again, it's like you have Zeref as the black wizard, and you theme each of them as the four horsemen. Zeref is death, Athena as conquest, Bestia as war, and Zero as famine. If you have all these, because again, it makes sense color-wise, and I know that somebody's going to be like, well, death rides a pale horse. You know what I mean, though, and black is constantly associated with death in fiction and stuff. And we should be happy just in cases where they get it right and they don't have pestilence in there. It's like, the free runner, or what is it in Darksiders with Fury and Strife, because those are horsemen. But as it were, I'd love to hear what you guys' takes on this is, and like what exactly you guys have to say about this. And whether or not you think this theory is going to come true, what do you think of the idea of it? Like, what do you think of this idea of, like, in these other special wizards? And that's why each faction has one of these weird kind of individuals tied to them. Because again, Bestia is in a spot where it's like we don't fully know what is going on with her and her backstory, but I feel like we could at least assume that there's got to be something special about her. I mean, I feel like it's got to be obvious. Athena, we already know. And then with Zero's the weird one because he doesn't have the same level of large stature in comparison, because obviously Zeref is Zeref. Athena, we already had a lot of Athena hype and, stuff obviously making her like, oh, in danger levels with Zeref, as well as being able to do stuff with dragons, absorb dragon power, transmute feelings, all her own weird stuff. Puts her in her own spot. Bestia, we don't have anything directly. I mean, if she's able to fight Ferris, I would assume it's automatically going to be some big stuff for her, this baseline. But I think that she's in a spot where we know just like hype-wise and where she's adjacent to, like, if she's directly below Igni and above Wed, then she's going to be a big deal in the long run. And Zero is the only one that's weird because he is a returning character from after such a long time, and you wouldn't expect him to be here. You wouldn't expect him to be as powerful he is and whatnot. But Athena is the one that is she's the one that I could see being the out of left field. Because with Zero, it's like Zero is one of these characters where it's like if we brought him in later, he'd be in that spot, but he was brought back relatively at the start of this arc. So it's like, okay, well, that was a crazy twist just out of nowhere. But Mishima loves to do these, like, there's something on the back burner you just don't know about yet. You haven't noticed it, or there's some hidden character waiting. And I think something with, like, Athena being used against the main cast, kind of like not like because I don't think it, like, if Elefseria turns on the main cast, I think it's like Elefseria's like, I'm close to my goal. You guys aren't going to stop me. The dragon gods are almost done and defeated. I've only so much left, and I was able to, because right now too he'd be in a good spot because he would have most of the dragon gods relatively out of the way. Two of them are on their side. We don't know what's going on with Alderaan. Assuming Viernes is still alive, but who knows? But also he would be. Who knows exactly what would be like the case of like now his heart is destroyed if he's like doesn't have to worry about like anyone acquiring it or what. But more so, he does have Athena now, so he has this very powerful weapon that it can be used against dragons and can absorb dragon power and such. So he is in a spot to where it's like if he is in fact evil, he could pop it at any point. But anyway, other than that, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I'll talk to you guys in the next one.